Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, May 16th, 2023, special meeting.
City Council of the City of Orange City for Tuesday, May 16th, 2023. Kaylee, will you take roll, please?
Councilmember Marks? Here. Councilmember John? Councilmember Jones? Here. Vice Mayor O'Connor?
Present.
Councilmember Stafford? Here. Councilmember Tiongson?
Here. That's yours, man.
Here. Okay, our invocation tonight is by Reverend Phyllis Bartle from St. Jude's Episcopal Church. Welcome, Phyllis, and thank you. Please rise.
Let us pray. O Lord, our governor, whose glory is in all the world, we commend this city to your merciful care, that being guided by your providence, we may dwell secure in your peace. Grant to the Orange City Council and to all in authority wisdom and strength to know and to do your will. Fill them with the love of truth and righteousness, and make them ever mindful of their calling to serve this people in your fear, through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, world without end. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, that was awesome, wasn't it? Close quarters now.
I love it when
Isn't
we
it
have
awesome?
to do Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, our first and only really item of business is resolution number 1, resolution number 274-23. Nacy, will you read that one for us, please? Or I can, either way.
Nope, I can read it. Thank you, Mayor. This is Resolution 2723, the City of Orange City Final Assessment Resolution. A resolution of Orange City, Florida, relating to capital improvements for South Kentucky Avenue, establishing the South Kentucky Avenue assessment area, determining that the real property comprising the assessment area will be specially benefited by the improvements, confirming the method of assessing the costs of the improvements against the real property that will be specially benefited thereby, establishing other terms and conditions of the assessments, approving the assessment roll, imposing assessments upon all tax parcels described in the assessment roll, providing the method of collection, directing recorded notice of the assessments, ratifying and confirming resolution number 259-23, and providing an effective date.
Nasa. After the presentations, then we'll go through the comments, because maybe some of your questions will be answered by the presentation tonight. Who's up first? Chris? You?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am Chris Rowe. I'm with the law firm of Bryant Miller Olive, and the city engaged me and my law firm, along with Greg Stevens of Colliers Engineering, to assist with the South Kentucky Avenue Improvement Project. By way of brief context, for the benefit of those who maybe hadn't attended the several workshops and presentations previously, cities and counties have the lawful authority to impose special assessments on real property to fund improvement projects. Special assessments are similar to property taxes in some respects when payment is mandatory. It's a charge that funds a given service or improvement. But they're also distinct in some ways. One of the ways they're distinct is that the method for calculating the charge is not set by statute. Instead, it's up to the local government who's imposing the assessment to choose the method of apportioning the cost of a project in the way it deems most fair and reasonable on the whole for the properties that are benefited. We have had, I think, by my count, 5 or 6 prior presentations on the improvement project, the options for improving the road, and the options for the special assessments that will be imposed in order to fund the improvements, if council determines tonight to impose the assessments. As a prerequisite to any imposition of assessments, a city council has to hear from the public comments, support, objections, before making a determination to actually impose the assessment. Tonight's hearing has been noticed. It's been fully noticed both through newspaper publication, but also through a mailed notice to affected property owners indicating the nature of the project, the assessments, the proposed amount of the assessment for each property, and also the time, date, and place of tonight's hearing for purposes of giving public input before the decision is made. So for this evening's presentation, I have a series of slides. I think there's 12 or 13 in all. Recap the history of how we got here, what the options are for the assessments, et cetera. At the end of that, council will receive public comment from those who wish to speak and address council on the matter, and then council will deliberate and ultimately vote on whether or not to adopt what we call the final assessment resolution, which under the City Code of Ordinances is the last step the City Council will take in determining whether or not to impose the assessment to fund the improvements to South Kentucky Avenue. And with that, I'll go ahead and start the PowerPoint. Christine, can you advance? So you'll see on this slide there is a map of the area surrounding South Kentucky Avenue. The section of the road that the city will improve is highlighted there in blue. It's labeled approximate extent of road improvements. The road is privately owned. It's very important to understand that. This is not a city road. Although it's publicly accessible, it's not owned by the public. It's not owned by the city. It was never formally dedicated to the city. The city never received the right to own and maintain the road. However, after the road began to fail, after decades of not being improved, certain residents in the community approached the city and said, "Can you please help us? We don't feel the road is safe. It's no longer in a safe condition. Please help." Well, the city determined if we're going to do that, then we'll need to assemble a small team to help us, both with figuring out how to fix the road, what improvements to make, but also how we're going to pay for it. One of the roles of the consultants who were engaged was to help figure out, well, if there is going to be an assessment to fund the project, which properties are going to be assessed? And the consulting team looked very closely at the area, determined traffic flow, traffic patterns, also determined, importantly, that certain properties, if not all of them, that have access or are in the vicinity of South Kentucky Avenue, assumed responsibility for maintaining the road through their original development approvals. So the road is currently, it's in, I believe, seven parcels, essentially. 7 different ownership entities own the road, but for each of those ownership entities and or the surrounding developments, as a condition of being able to develop, those developments assumed responsibility for maintaining the road. That responsibility went unfulfilled, which is why the road is in the degraded condition it is now. Property owners approached the city, said, "Can you help?" The city engaged the consulting team of my law firm and also Colliers Engineering to explore what sort of options were available as far as the improvement to the road, and also how to go about assessing for it. First step was we determined a proposed assessment area boundary. The red line you see up here includes all of the properties that will be subject to the assessment in some fashion in order to pay for the road improvements. The section to the north between Graves Avenue and where the blue line starts, that's immediately adjacent to the proposed Liberty Station development. As a condition of Liberty Station's development approval, they have agreed to repair that section of the road. So Liberty Station developers will pay for the section to the far north there, above the blue line. That cost will be borne by the developer of Liberty Station. It will not be included in the assessment charged to everybody else in the area. As a result, the assessment is considerably lower because that northern section intersects with Graves Avenue and therefore is the most expensive portion of the road to improve. In exchange or in recognition of the expense to the Liberty Station development team for doing that section of the road, that property is excluded from the assessment program. You can see the red boundary does not include the proposed Liberty Station development there at the northwest corner of Graves and South Kentucky Avenue. So one of the questions that comes up with any assessment program is once the assessment is calculated for each property, how are we going to go about collecting it? Assessments are commonly collected on the property tax bill, the same bill as ad valorem taxes that the county tax collector mails each November. But another question is, well, for the total dollar amount, how many years do we collect it over? Do we collect it all in one installment on one line item on a given year's tax bill? Or do we spread it out over time? And most communities choose to spread it out over time. 15 or 20 years is about average because it makes, of course, the overall cost burden lower to the affected property owners. Rather than having to come out of pocket for one lump sum, you can pay it over a 15 or 20-year term. And the basic term the City Council is considering for this assessment is 20 years. The process for levying assessments is set forth in the City Code of Ordinances. It's actually City Ordinance number 211. That process begins with adoption of a resolution by City Council at its public meeting called the Initial Assessment Resolution that describes the project, the cost of the project, how the assessments work, how they'll be collected over time, how they're calculated for each property. And the process concludes with a public hearing, which is what we're having tonight. At the end of the public hearing, again, the council will determine whether or not to impose the assessments by approving what we call the final assessment resolution. Christine, next slide. So I mentioned that the road is privately owned. As part of this project, in fact, one of the first steps the City Council had to take was to acquire, if not outright ownership, then at least easements from the owners of the property so that they could go onto the road and do the improvements. The city has obtained those temporary construction easements, which will convert to deeds. In other words, the city will own the road at the end of the project from all of the property owners, with the exception of one. The Liberty Station developer is working with Sun RV, which is the owner of the RV park in North, on the easement for that section of the road. There is an issue regarding the legal description, describing the boundary of the easement, that it's my understanding has been resolved and is basically now concluded.
I mean, at this time, we have the legal ability to go in and make, the city has the legal ability to go in and make the improvements. And then once the improvements are done, as Chris said, then the city will accept deeds. Portions of the road have already been deeded over to us. We had one property owner that just owned the middle of the road. That's all they owned. And so we got the deed from him pretty quickly. But after that occurs, then the road will be a public road, and the maintenance for that road will be as any other public road in the city. The maintenance costs will be paid for by the general public, like another road. So this assessment is merely for, I shouldn't say merely, because it's a big deal. We're having to do a lot of improvements for the road, but this assessment is for the improvements of the road, and Chris can go more into that.
Very good. So Christine, next slide, please. So here is the current project cost estimate. It's basically $1.2 million, and that includes about $820,000 of estimated hard costs, the actual cost of improving the road. And this is for option 2. I mentioned that Colliers Engineering was engaged to present various options for improving the road. Colliers presented 3 options. City Council has determined to go with the one in the middle, which raises the road to current transportation standards, but doesn't have some of the more advanced features that would have really significantly increased the cost. Council was mindful of repairing the road and putting it into good shape, but also not overly burdening the citizens responsible for paying for it by including additional features that were not necessary under state transportation law. There's costs involved for the engineering and the design, the setup of the assessment program that's under discussion tonight. The city previously paid for roadway repairs in the amount of $48,000, so a portion of the overall cost would go to reimburse the city for its prior contribution of $48,000. And that is the maximum amount that would be paid through the special assessment program. That's assuming a couple things. One, that the project is fully funded through the assessment, and that Liberty Station and that northern segment proceed as planned. The city does not absorb that responsibility. Christine? So apportionment methodology. Anytime a city adopts an assessment program, it has to determine the method it's going to use in order to divide the total project cost among the properties that are benefited by the project. This is the so-called apportionment methodology. Apportionment methodology is not set by state statute. A city can choose the method that works best for its community and the project at hand. Part of the task of the consulting team engaged by the city for this was to help them come up with the methodology that makes sense for this project. We took a close look at some of the options that were available and determined that for this particular project, the primary method of apportionment would be based on trip generation. This is a methodology that's in widespread use not only throughout the state of Florida but throughout the United States for purposes of allocating the costs of transportation improvements among benefited properties. It basically measures the number of trips generated by each property to use the improved roadway and apportions the assessment according to trips. So if your property generates more trips than someone else's, you use the road more, you'll pay a little bit larger portion of the overall cost than someone who's using it less. We also recognized, however, that a significant number of properties in the assessment area, although they may not use the road as much as the primary trip tier, they nonetheless benefit from the project by virtue of the fact that this project will satisfy their original maintenance responsibilities that have gone undeferred for 30 or 40 years now. So we have two tiers of benefit. One is the peak hour usage tier for the properties that have immediate access to the road and are expected to use the road frequently, and then a secondary tier, which is for folks who have those ongoing maintenance responsibilities that have gone unfulfilled to date. 90% of the costs are going to be attributed to peak hour usage and allocated to each property on the basis of the number of trips each will generate during the peak hour usage tier, which is rush hour, essentially. And then 10% of the project costs will be attributed to the so-called availability tier on a per dwelling unit or per RV space basis. So when you break down the total cost of $1.2 million into those two tiers, $1,080,000 will be allocated to peak hour usage, and availability will make up $120,000. Christine? And here is a visual depiction of the two tiers, the two benefit tiers. Tier 1 is trips. The parcels that are shaded in green will be assessed based on the number of trips that each generates or is capable of generating. And then Tier 2, the availability tier, is again, there's lesser usage, but nonetheless some ongoing responsibility for maintaining the road that hasn't gone fulfilled to date. Next slide. So a little more detail about how the peak hour usage tier works. It's parcels that are immediately adjacent to South Kentucky Avenue or they have ready access to the improved roadway. We determine the number of trips to assign to each by reference to the trip generation manual prepared by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. This is a manual that, again, is in widespread use. It contains statistics on how many trips, vehicular trips, a given development would be expected to make, both during regular hours, peak hour usage, etc. Based on our reference to that manual, we determined that 0.99 trips would be assigned to each single-family residential unit. Mobile homes in a mobile home park will be assigned 0.46 trips. For vacant land, we assign 2 dwelling units per acre, which is the development intensity allowed under current city code provisions. We also addressed fractional allocation. Fractional allocation is basically just an adjustment we made to the trip assignment to reflect the fact that certain parcels, although they have immediate access to South Kentucky Avenue, they also have access by maybe shorter or quicker means to get to Graves or Veterans Memorial Parkway. So we adjusted the trip assignment downward to reflect the fact that South Kentucky Avenue may not be their only or primary mode of getting in and out of the neighborhood. The total trip count, and again, this is peak hour usage, the total number of peak hour trips for the entirety of the assessment area is 432.27, and that's divided up among 125 distinct parcels of real property, many of which are in the Sherwood Oaks neighborhood. Next slide. So here's how we derive the assessment rate for Tier 1. We basically just took the dollar amount of the project, 90% of that $1.2 million, and you divide it by the number of trips to get the rate. And that results in a rate of $2,499 per trip. That's total. The total cost attributed to each trip is $2,499. When you annualize that and break it down, remember I said that you can collect these things in a number of years. When you collect them over 20 years at an assumed interest rate of 6%, including the collection costs, that's $218 a year for 20 years. Yes, sir. The tax collector takes 2% of that as the fee for assisting with this process. The 4% is a conservative estimate on what it would cost the city to borrow money right now in the recent inflation influenced borrowing atmosphere. In my experience, 4.0 for borrowing is actually, it would be a pretty good rate if the city could get that. Next slide. This is the description of the secondary tier that again called availability. It's for those parcels that are expected to use the roadway less, but they still benefit from the project because of those original maintenance responsibilities that have gone unfulfilled. They do have emergency access to South Kentucky Avenue through a gate or barrier which can be dropped in an evacuation event. And also some modest increase of property value may occur just by being in proximity to the newly improved roadway. For the properties that are in this tier are going to be assessed on the basis of dwelling units or RV spaces. And when you count up all the dwelling units and RV spaces in this tier, it's a total of 665 units. Next slide, Christine. So again, if you do the math, you take the number of spaces and divide it into the cost attributed to Tier 2, which is $120,000, divided by 665, and you come up with an assessment rate total of $181 per dwelling unit. And if you, again, annualize that based on the assumptions I mentioned earlier of 20 years and 6% annual carry, it's about $16 per year per dwelling unit or per RV space. And here's a summary of what some of the actual properties out there will be expected to pay based on 20 years at 6% interest and the total amount they're assessed. You can see for the Tier 1 rate, it's basically $24.99 per trip. Annualized, it's $218 per trip per year. $181 total for availability, $16 per dwelling unit RV space on the annualized rate. Here's what the single-family residential properties in Sherwood Oaks would pay. Again, $218 a year. $24.74 total. Here's the assessment breakdown. I won't read them all out, but you can see there for yourself, Country Village, RV Park, Oakhurst, etc. By the way, if the PowerPoint is difficult to see, we do have some printed copies here. We'd be glad to share those if anybody would like a copy. Greg? Christine, could you advance to the next slide, please?
Did we run out of handouts?
I have more.
Okay. There'll be more handouts coming, and I'd like to remind the audience to please keep your conversations to yourselves. If you need to talk, go outside. Please be respectful to whoever's speaking at the time. It just makes it easier for everyone. I'd appreciate that.
So a couple additional notes here. The assessment rates that are included in the presentation and in the resolution you have for consideration this evening are based on a number of factors. The total project cost that's being financed through the assessments, the interest rate, and the length of the repayment term. Just like with a mortgage, if you have a 15-year term versus a 30-year term, the amount is going to vary depending on the length of the term. Also, there may be, and is expected to be, future development in the area. Some of the property that now is vacant or undeveloped will develop in the future. As those properties develop, they may be attributed additional assessment units above and beyond what we have developed here at the outset. If that is the case, that additional assessment revenue will work to lower everyone else's assessment a little bit. Christine? During its prior discussions on the matter, City Council has considered the possibility of contributing some city funding to the project. Remember, this is a privately owned road, never dedicated to the city. The city does not have a legal obligation to undertake improvement of the road, has no obligation to pay for any portion of the improvement of the road. But it has asked, what would the numbers look like if, for example, we were to contribute $60,000 to the cost? You can see here there are two columns set up that show what the assessment rates are, both in total and for annualized rates, based on the full $1.2 million project cost being assessed. And then here's a secondary column which shows here's what those same rates would look like if the amount assessed were instead $1.14 million because the city is contributing $60,000. And over on the right-hand side, you can see various scenarios regarding the length of the term. Again, if you spread the length, the number of years out further, that's going to have the effect of reducing the annual payment. Just like changing the interest rate will impact the payments. You can see some examples here on the far right column of what the rates would look like under different financing scenarios. Christine? So here's the timeline of events to date. On March 21st, City Council adopted that initial assessment resolution, which again described the area, described the project, the proposed assessment rates, the methodology we're using to apportion the assessments. It scheduled this public hearing this evening and directed the mailing and publication of notice. Those notices went out. They included information on who to call at City if there were any questions about it. Those calls were fielded by Becky Mendez's office, and she reports having received 9 calls in response to the almost 300 notices we sent out, with people asking for further information about the public hearing and also the assessment project. Tonight's City Council special meeting is for purposes of conducting a public hearing to hear comments from the public before determining whether or not to impose the assessment, as is required by Florida law. Once you hear those comments, you will vote on whether or not to approve the final assessment resolution, which is the last step required under the City Code of Ordinances in order to impose the assessments and improve the assessment roll. The assessment roll is just the list of all the properties that are subject to the assessment and the dollar amount for each. The final assessment resolution also directs notice of prepayment opportunities. If council adopts the assessment resolution tonight and imposes the assessments, then thereafter staff and the consulting team will work to send out notices of prepayment to all affected property owners, letting them know that if you want to, you can prepay the balance in full and thereby avoid the annual installments on the property tax bill and the interest costs that will go along with that and collection costs. If that is to happen, then in June, the construction bid process will start with a bid award scheduled for sometime in July. Mid-August will be the prepayment deadline for those who wish to prepay, and for those who don't prepay, the first installment of the assessment will appear on the property tax bill issued in November of this year. Christine? After my presentation concludes, City Council can ask of me whatever questions, further information they might like. Then they will hear public input, and at the conclusion of the public input, they will vote on approval of the final assessment resolution. And finally, staff recommendation regarding the resolution. Staff recommends approval and adoption of the final assessment resolution and has suggested 3 different approving motions. If adopting the resolution as written, which again contemplates that the full project cost of $1.2 million will be paid for through the assessment, then it would be simply motion to approve resolution number 274-23. If the council is inclined to make a $60,000 contribution to the city, then likewise a motion is presented here. If council determines to change any of the other terms, whether it be the city contribution, the length of time over which the assessment will be collected, or the interest rate, there's a motion here to reflect that as well. And with that, I think we're done. And that concludes the presentation. Glad to hear any questions.
Does anyone on council here have any questions for Chris or comments? Okay, seeing none. Is anyone going to follow up behind you, or that's it?
Sir, I'm the only presentation of
Okay,
the consulting
great.
team.
Okay, so I will start calling the speaker request. And I noticed a few people came in late. If you'd like to speak, please fill out one of these requests. Bree back there has them. She'll pass them out to you. And get them up here, and we'll hear what you have to say. Please note you're limited by 3 minutes. The clerk will be starting the timer once you come up. And also state your name and address for the record, please. So first up is Sarah Kearney. Yes, come up there. All right, please listen. I don't want to have to. I'm a school teacher, so I like order. If there's not order, I'm going to ask that you please, respect the people that are talking. We may not agree, but we'll be respectful of each other. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Kearney. I live in Oakhurst, 1941 Oak Estates Drive. Our community doesn't have vehicle access to this area, and our property doesn't border Kentucky at all. So in order for us to get to South Kentucky, we have to leave Veterans Memorial, go right on Graves, and then go right on South Kentucky. So, we don't have access to that road at all. I'm not sure what it means when you say the developer would have some sort of obligation to maintain it, but our property doesn't even border it. It's Volusia Memorial.
I
that
can
owns.
take a stab at explaining that to you.
Okay.
You have one ingress egress in the front on veterans, and there's also one in the back you may not be aware of that our fire department emergency vehicles will have to use in the event of an emergency. For example, if a tree goes down and the road's blocked, you're going to need another way to get in and out of there. So that's where it plays into what we're doing here.
Okay. I don't think so, though.
Please silence your cell phones.
I don't think we own that property. That's Volusia Memorial.
Dale, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So the reason why you're included in the assessment is really twofold. One of it is a historical reason. Oakhurst was part of the original subdivision that was created in the late 1980s that had responsibility for maintaining Kentucky Avenue in its perpetuity. And over the years, of course, Oakhurst was constructed and people forgot that they had this responsibility to maintain.
We had a new buyer.
Absolutely. New buyers, new people came in.
The properties were
and
separated.
Everybody was put in this position where they forgot they had the responsibility to maintain Kentucky Avenue. And, not everybody, but certainly all new buyers. People just thought it was being maintained when in fact it wasn't, and they forgot their historical responsibility for doing so. The second reason why you're included and why you're paying such a small fractional analysis is there actually is a back entranceway in there. We hope you never have to use it. We hope that always there will be the ability for you to leave and go in and out of your subdivision by Veterans Memorial Parkway. But there is the back entranceway. I believe it connects onto Abbotswood. Is that correct? And then down Kentucky Avenue.
No. We can't get a car out.
So I don't know the exact road connection, but there is one there, and that is the reason.
I've lived there for 15 years. There's no road you can't leave our neighborhood without going out the front gate. There's nowhere to drive any vehicle.
It's closed now. It can be opened in the event of an emergency.
Wait a minute. What, people, I'm going to ask for order, and if you continue to talk, I'm going to ask you to leave. It's as simple as that. We're trying to have a conversation. We normally don't address people while they're talking, but we're here to hear what you have to say and work with you, so please work with us.
Right. As far as I know, and I've lived there for 15 years, our neighborhood is surrounded by a brick wall and then the black fencing. There's nowhere to get any vehicles through.
It's exactly where the connection would be made in times of emergency. And I'm talking about a hurricane, so.
Unless you would go through like one of the homeowners' actual yards and.
No, I've seen it before. There's an actual area there that can be used in case of emergency. No, we're doing one at a time. If you want to speak.
Show them this.
No, because we're not going to let it get willy-nilly. If you have something to say, fill out a form, come on up here. Otherwise, everyone will be wanting to speak out of turn.
Okay, or maybe you have it on the map where somebody that knows could show us where that might be.
I don't
But
have it
as
on
far as I know,
the
there's
map.
nowhere to get.
We can look it up perhaps while you
Right.
go on. And
I mean,
let
we would
other
have as much
people
access
speak.
to Kentucky Avenue as anybody that lives within the city. We can't get there without leaving our neighborhood from Veterans Memorial. We could get there on foot if we walked through the property that Volusia Memorial owns, which borders Oakhurst, and that's what's between Oakhurst and South Kentucky. But, I mean, not with a vehicle, not with a car. There's like a detention pond there at the corner, which would be the only access that maybe before the detention pond was there, you could possibly drive a vehicle up there. I'm out of time, but, yeah.
Gentleman behind you, he knows about it.
Hi, Kevin Lyons. I'm her neighbor on Oakhurst. Yes, there is a fire, emergency fire gate. As you're heading out of our property, at the end of the wall, there is a gate past Sherman's house. It's always been locked. It's chained. The only one that has access is the fire department themselves if they have to get in there and gain access. So it's not a public easement for anyone except for emergency vehicles, and it gives access to Sherwood Oak homes, so you'd actually go out and just make a left and get onto Veterans Highway. So we don't even have to go to Kentucky. So I mean, my thing is, it just seems like it's excessive. Our property tax was just changed. I'm paying over $5,000 for a postage stamp piece of property. I had to go out and spend $4,000 on a water filter system because the water in this city doesn't even meet minimum standards. There's no talk about raising taxes for our water, but you're going to raise taxes for a road that nobody uses that basically goes into a dead end. We don't have access. Our community does not have an access, and there's no reason why Oakhurst should be included in this. I just feel that, just like the increase in the property taxes is based on green space. The council themselves, you guys gave the okay for the developer to build the houses the way they are, and then suddenly 15 years later you decide you're going to have some green space increase in property taxes, which puts my bill's over $5,000 a year for nothing. And it seems like all the buck is passed on to the wealthy northerners to pick up the expense on roads, water systems, everything. It seems ridiculous. And when I got this thing, I'm saying now they're increasing it. They can't even give us fresh water to drink. I got to spend $4,000 out of my own pocket to get a filtration system in my garage so I can drink water and not worry about getting cancer. And you're increasing this for a road that we don't even have access to unless you have bolt cutters and in the middle of a fire. So I mean, to me, this is ridiculous. But I just came down here to just express my frustration in the fact that we don't even have clean drinking water, and you want to change roads that nobody has access to.
Well, that's a whole different subject. All right, Deborah Amato.
We're passing it down. That was his.
Oh.
No, his pink slip needs to go. Just to clarify, I'm Sherwood Oaks. I own the property 544 Kings Castle Court with my parents. Can you state your name? Deborah Amato. And I'm kind of new. They've gotten the paperwork, didn't understand. So I was just going to ask, in our fee of $218, it says total 2,000 and change. Is 218 what's added to the tax, or the 2,400 is going to be added to the tax?
Christine or Devlin, who wants to address that?
Sherwood Oaks, the 218 is a possible annual cost. The gross, if you paid up front, is the $24.99. Otherwise, if you pay it over time, the 218, that would have the interest and the fee that's paid to the property appraiser and the tax collector, and you would pay more. But the fee is proposed if we did the 1.2 million, would be 218 annualized if you took the 20-year, depending on where they end up tonight, yes.
Okay, so 20 years versus 2,400 I pay in one lump sum and I never pay again?
Yes. You can pay 24, where we will bill, as in the presentation, there is a prepayment period where the city will issue invoices, and if it's paid by a certain date in August, then you would not have it on your assessment, and you would pay the $24.99 or whatever's finalized tonight. It's your option as to whether you pay it in a one lump or pay it over time once they pass or adopt the resolution.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yes.
I thought it was 24. You're paying that every year.
No.
Well,
No.
we're paying the 218 annualized
Just-
over 20 years, so it would be 218 times 20.
Okay. I need to know.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Deborah Amato just went. John Graybill? Graybill.
My name's John Graybill. I live at 1145 Oak Landing in the Oakhurst community. First of all, I'd like to thank you for letting me speak at the meeting tonight. I know things get a little heated sometimes, but I just want to state a few things. I've lived in this community for a little bit more than 5 years. My understanding was our neighborhood was built somewhere around 2004, 2005, and that the original builder, which was Mercedes Homes, made a deal with the city in perpetuity to put money aside to improve that road for a couple of reasons. One was that there was supposed to be access for us to the golf course that was never built. So there was a golf course originally in the plan for Oakhurst Golf Estates is what the original name was, but that never happened for whatever reason. I don't know. I didn't live here at the time, but my understanding was that access was specifically because that was how the golf course was going to get access secondary to the neighborhood. So as part of that, I received a letter advising of a special assessment, and I just wanted to voice my disagreement, mainly on the same issues that have already been brought up, that our neighborhood has absolutely zero access to that road. There is a fire gate. I've seen the city come through there with a water company, I think, come through and open that gate, but I don't think we should be held responsible for any special financial responsibility for a road that we cannot use. I don't know why there's a special assessment to start with. Is it going to be a normal process now when a road needs to be resurfaced, or that a road we live on, now we have financial responsibility to repair it? I thought that's what we pay taxes for. Perhaps the city should be asking more money from all the builders of the current housing projects that have been allowed to move forward in the last few years, that are adding these hundreds of car trips to the roads that are basically getting overburdened and they're falling apart. If those companies want to build, then they should be responsible for more than just widening an intersection, is my opinion. I would like to add one thing before I finish. I have lived here for a little bit more than 6 years, and I've watched the steady deterioration of the roads around us. Veterans Memorial, the right turn onto Rhode Island is an example. Harley Strickland's another example that are just mess. And I don't see any money being set aside to fix these roads. Up until a year ago, you couldn't even see the lines on Harley Strickland. So where's the emphasis to fix the roads that people actually use rather than a road that never gets used, at least by anybody I think that's in this room tonight, at least from Oakhurst. Thank you.
Thank you. Moncrick? Is that right?
My name is Kim Munkitrick, and I live at 1219 Oak Landing in the Oakhurst Estates. I won't beat a dead horse, sorry, beat it, but over the issue of, you obviously know now that we don't have any access. We don't use that. Your algorithm is based on the number of trips. We take 0. I'll confess, I've been here 2 years. I took 1. I accidentally thought I was turning on Veterans, and I did a UE on Kentucky, so that was the one time I used it. I guess what I want to say now is I was a little disheartened when I saw the issue with the builder only going down that one section, the new Kentucky development. I think the city missed an opportunity. They're increasing traffic. They're moving in. They are a builder. That is who should be paying the improvements. Instead, to subsidize everyone, you decided to cut out our little area and say, here you go, even though we don't have access. If you're going to do that, make Veterans a toll road and charge everyone who goes down there. I mean, everybody's equally as responsible as we are. They do as many trips as we do, everyone else in the city does. So I just think it's unfair, based on your algorithm, to charge Oakhurst anything. Thank you.
Joe Riker?
Good evening. Joe Raker. I live at 1174 Oak Landing Drive. I'm also in the Oakhurst community. First of all, I don't envy your all's position. This is a tough position to be in. I appreciate you trying to make the hard decisions. I want to make a couple of points, though. Some of it will probably echo what others have said. One, we don't have access. The algorithm says 10%. I've talked to a lot of people in my neighborhood, and I can't get 10% of them to say they've ever driven down that road. I've also been down that road once after I got the notice that you guys were going to special assess me for it. I drove down it to see what is the road that they're even talking about, because I've never been down it in my life. And I grew up in Deltona, so. Honestly, I don't have strong feelings. You know, the assessment amount, like, okay, well, I might pay it. That might not be a popular opinion in this room. But I want to make a couple of points because, you know, if you were to push me and say, well, which way should you go? I'd say, well, no, because we don't even have access to that road. I can't drive on it, and I don't drive on it. But I want the council to think about a couple of other things. One, the boundary seems somewhat arbitrary, right? We don't have access to the road. And to me, if the city is taking on a private road, this is a city problem, not a arbitrary boundary problem, right? So then everyone should have to take on that in Orange City. Again, not a popular opinion, but I think from a rational perspective, that's the most rational decision. That's the hard decision that you all have to make. Instead, what you've done is you've drawn a line around a couple of communities that don't really use this road and said, hey, we'll throw, 10% of this cost their way and see what happens. The other thing I want to mention is I think this sets a bad precedent, actually a couple of bad precedents. So one is this is not the only private road that's owned by a community built by a developer in Orange City. In fact, Oakhurst has private roads. And I'm not sure that it's a great idea to basically say, hey, your community can't afford to fix this, you didn't maintain it, you're not taking care of it, it's not owned by the city, it's not a city problem, but you know what, the city will take care of it, and they'll just throw the cost on everybody else, because that's what you're doing tonight. And I don't think that you want everybody knocking on your door saying, well, our road has private roads too. Can you take care of them? I know there's other gated communities in Orange City. The last bad precedent that I think it's setting, and I think I heard it tonight, you guys said that basically, hey, great, we'll throw you a bone. Liberty Station is building, so they'll take part of this road. And in 10 to 15 years, I'm going to be sitting in this same meeting, having this same conversation about how that road wasn't maintained because Liberty Station built in here and then left. Because that's exactly what happened here. Builders came in and they built the road. Communities had whatever, I've never seen any documents that say I have responsibility for this road, but apparently I do because 30 years ago someone signed a contract saying that we have responsibility for that road. And I think the same exact thing is going to happen if this moves forward. Because what you're doing is you're saying to Liberty Station, great, you'll fund part of this so that we don't have to pass it on to the residents. But at the end of the day, we're all going to end up paying for it. Not only tonight, but 10, 15 years down the road.
Just to clarify one point, the city will maintain the road once it's built. So if they leave, it's our baby. Okay, Sherman Boswell. Good evening.
Could you bring up this map? The tier 2 availability? Because I live in Oakhurst also. Sherman Boswell. I was the first HOA
Please state your name and address in the mic for the record.
Sherman Boswell, 1911 Oak Estates, and I was the first HOA president in Oakhurst when we took the property over from Mercedes. The only reason, there we go. So the only reason I moved into the neighborhood is because they promised us the golf course. And the golf course.
You got to speak into, sir. Sir, you have to speak. I know, but you have to speak into the mic because the meeting's being recorded.
Okay. So it's possible, and I'm not trying to defame anybody, but you might not really understand how our neighborhood is. Because on Rhode Island and Veterans, they were supposed to build a road to go across the Deltona eventually. And back there is where we have another access gate on Ivy Lane. Right now it's just a loop with a fence around it. But that was supposed to be our second access out of the neighborhood to Rhode Island so we could go to Veterans Memorial. We've never had an access to Kentucky. Now, if someone drives their golf cart back there, they may be able to access Kentucky. So when you come off of Grays and you make a right on Kentucky, you got Shadow on one side, Country Village, I believe is the name of the RV park, on the other side, and it drives dead into a dead end. It has no access to Oakhurst whatsoever. So whatever Mercedes agreed to do might have been a good idea back then. I don't mind paying $16 a year. It's the principle. We have no access. Listen, we had a fire. I don't know if you guys remember. We had a fire a couple years ago. It was in the very back part of our neighborhood. They couldn't access that fire from our neighborhood. They had to go down that dirt road on Rhode Island to get back to the back of our neighborhood to put that fire out. And if they hadn't had that access from Rhode Island to get to the back of our neighborhood, that fire could have encroached into our neighborhood. We have a lot of four-wheeling people back there, right off of I-4, right on the Country Village. They're all back there, right? But they cannot access our neighborhood because, like she said, we have a wrought iron fence back there. okay? And then our neighbors along the very back road have put their fences up, so no one can get into our neighborhood from back there. And again, like I said, I don't mind paying the $16, but it's the principle.
Thank you. Wesley Kilmeyer? Kilmeyer, sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, and staff. My name is Wesley Kilmeyer, 2061 Friar Tuck Lane, Orange City, Florida, and I live at Sherwood Oaks. Had quite a prepared speech tonight, but I think we'll go forward a little quicker. Just a comment about the no ownership. I know that during this proceedings, we've all talked about ownership and responsibilities for that land. None of us, except for a very few in this room, have been here for over 30 years. And of course, our documents and all the things we've signed and all our agreements, there's nothing in there about maintaining the road. We've never had any ownership of the road. So I feel that all of us are in the same boat that the city is in. The city had made the comment once that they couldn't go in and fix the road because you didn't own the road. Well, neither did we. So therefore, how are we going to do it? When we had the hole out there, some of our people said, let's go get some sand, fill it up, and fix it ourselves, and that type of thing. So just that's a point of clarification. As far as city usage of the road, I would like to see the city participate in this because of the fact you have a sewer lift station, I guess, right at the end of our property, and you're there frequently servicing that, doing lots of things, and of course you have the water treatment plant at the end of the road. So I think that the city does have a stake in that and has some responsibility to help with that in a monetary way since you have always used the road for a number of years. And as far as the assessment, I understand we need to have an equal assessment, but I don't believe we've got an equal playing field. It appears to me that Sherwood Oaks is being penalized simply because we're single-family homes. I don't know why we play of a larger, you're basically saying that if you live in a single-family home, you're going to drive more than someone else in a manufactured home. And just a brief demographics of our neighborhood, we have a neighborhood of 95 homes. And out of those 95 homes, 54% of us are over 55. 48% of us are fully retired and don't go anywhere. And that also includes the people who work at home. And then we have another 5% are absentee owners who are seldom at their homes. They live somewhere else. So you look at that, just on that demographic alone, we're only making 48.4 or 0.48 trips per day. I just would like to see a more even playing field. I feel that we are, or our community feels that we are paying the bulk of this. We're paying a far greater assessment than anyone else who uses the road, and I just cannot believe that other people would drive any less than we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Walton.
Good evening. My name is Alex Walton. I live at 1123 Oak Landing Drive, and I represent Oakhurst as the board president. So first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come up here and speak. And I appreciate and understand that every member up here has a very hard choice in front of them. As we can hear from the folks that have spoken tonight, there's a lot of different opinions. Most folks feel that they do not have any sort of responsibility for this or a reduced responsibility. And from your point of view on the city, there's a road that's unsafe, there's people that are driving on it, all of that. So you have a very hard choice ahead of you. I'm not going to touch on most of the things that have already been spoken of because they are very clear. I would like to clarify a couple of pieces that was mentioned by legal counsel over and over as far as the precedent for doing this is benefit to the members. This improvement requires benefit to the folks that have access to it. As we've said, we have no access. There is zero benefit to us. The little piece, the piece that was mentioned about the gate that has always been locked does not have any improvements between the road that is on the other side of the fence and our side of the fence. So therefore, you have to actually jump 2 curbs and drive through a grass area in order to even get through that fence if it were to be open. So in the case of us as members using it for any sort of situation of emergency or anything else, it's actually more dangerous for us to utilize that little piece there. There is nothing in our developers agreement, our original developers agreement or amendments about this road at all. So if there had been something original that overrides, that wasn't overridden by our developers agreement that talked about maintenance of Kentucky, I would ask that that be produced for us. That should be here and available if that was used as a precedent for this. And then there was one other question that I had, that the road would be transferred to the city afterwards. So, and is that a correct statement? It will become, the city will own that road afterwards, and it'll be a public road. So basically, it sounds like the members around here are buying this road from the folks, and then the rest of the city afterwards will be involved. Why not just involve the entire city in the beginning and take the arbitrariness out of it? Thank you.
Please let
The record reflect that Fran Darms came in at 7:25, 7:24.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's okay. Pat Reeves.
Pat Reeves, 2090 Sherwood Oaks, Sherwood Forest Drive, Orange City. I was here back during the hurricanes. You might remember me. But I just want to say I do object to the amount that you are assessing us at Sherwood Oaks. We've had to do many things without the city's help because of the private road, because of the pond. And we're just tapped out, I guess is the word to use. Many of us are retired. Many of us are on single income, Medicare, Medicaid. And I just feel like you should reconsider the amount of money that you're trying to assess us. Everything is going up. And it's putting a lot of pressure on the residents. And I think the city should take the responsibility of helping us as much as you can. Maybe when the road becomes public, you'll consider the next hurricane and be there to assist us with that as well. So.
Thank you. Jose Zeri.
Jose Irizarry. I live at 1052 Ivy Lake Drive in Oakhurst. As many people already said, we have no access to that road. We never use that road. I've never been down Kentucky Avenue. The assessment methods that you guys use seem pretty arbitrary. Throw it on the wall, see if it sticks. I object to paying any assessment, $16, $5. It doesn't matter. It just seems like it's unfair. And I would also like to see the historic agreements that are on file somewhere for Oakhurst. That would be interesting to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Fisher.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Fisher. I live at 1061 Ivy Lake Drive in Oakhurst. I'm not going to beat a dead horse of what everybody's already said tonight. I think you guys already know how you're going to vote regardless. This is the principal thing for all of us. So you see everybody out here? These are your constituents. So remember, when you're voting, we will also be voting later on. Remember that. That's all I'm going to say.
Luis Hernandez. I've got one more after Lewis. If anyone else wants to speak, please do it for him, and we'll get you up here. Go ahead, Louis.
Hello, my name is Luis Hernandez. It's 1235 Natural Oaks Drive, Orange City. Thank you all, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity. I think most have been covered here tonight, with the exception. I'm a business owner here in Orange City. Also own several properties also in Volusia County. And over the years, I was actually the first person who placed a deposit at Oakhurst back in 2005. What I have seen over the last several years, 2 years or so, is a lot of struggle. There are a lot of people struggling. I can afford it. I don't have a problem with that. Besides that, I would have to disagree that there are many others in the local communities that are using these roads. So I believe that if we are to pay, others should pay. But besides that, what I'd like to speak to you about tonight is the struggling families that I have encountered, widows that live in our Oakhurst communities. We have witnessed 40-60% inflation on foods. We are seeing it in the electric, in power. We're seeing it in the water bills. Our taxes, both the car insurance, home insurance. I'm paying double this year for my home insurance. And as I speak to these widows and people that live in our community, how would they be able to afford that? How is this fair to them? So I'm voicing for these people that are concerned as we continue to rise, not only in just this bill that we're facing, but also for those doctor bills and medications. Everything seems to continue to rise. So I just hope that you would reconsider and you would think that, this is both a blue-collar community as well as a white-collar community. So just think of these single moms and families that are struggling today. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody Westville. Westville? Did I say your name right?
Jody Westfall, 2011 Massachusetts Avenue. A little bit different from everybody here. Can you bring up the map of the outline of where everybody's at? Yes, the road needs to be improved, for sure. In agreement with everybody here, everybody in the city should pay for it. I mean, we know traffic is not getting any less here, right? People find a way to get somewhere, anywhere, right, to beat the traffic. So I am in the L, right above Sherwood Oaks Fair. So the new subdivision is going around my property and the Ashley's property. I've been here for 44 years in that house. I was here when Kentucky was dirt, which some of you might not know. I was here before Sherwood Oaks. I was here before the golf course. So my access is actually going to be in the neighborhood for Rommel and myself. Maybe possibly seeing if, since the developer is paying for the first half of the road, maybe that's phase one, right? They're fitting the bill, right, for phase one. That gets that traffic area improved for the first part of the road, right? Leave the second half of Kentucky as is, right? Is it bad? Yes. I don't think the second half is as bad as the first part of it, right? And then use that, right? What happens? Is Kentucky going to go to Rhode Island? We say no, but, right, things change, right? So maybe let's think small before we think big, right? And assess it after the subdivision goes in. What does traffic look like? Assess the pattern at Graves, all of that good stuff. And then take the second half and say, maybe you only fit it, and then take that second chunk and break it up, right, in the next phase, and you redo the next phase. I mean, I think the back half of the road hasn't really had a whole lot of maintenance, no flooding, right? I don't live on the back half. I don't take the back half. I take the front half, right? I'm going to be in the part that the subdivision's paying for, but yet I'm assessed to pay, right, for the road that I'm not using, which doesn't make sense, right? So I'm asking you guys that, yes, the road needs to improve. I think the people that use it knows it needs to be improved. but let's take it and let's think small. That's all I ask.
Thank you. Letha Webb.
Because of what I've just heard. And if I lived in Oakhurst, I would feel...
Letha, please state your name and address for the
Oh,
record,
I'm
please.
sorry. It's Letha Webb, 495 Kings Castle Drive in Sherwood Oaks. And as I said, I would feel just like everyone in Oakhurst. $16 doesn't sound like a
Letha,
lot.
you're speaking, I'm sorry, but you're speaking to the council, not...
Okay, $16 doesn't sound like much. I appreciate the fact that they're saying it all has to do with principle. But if we all lived our lives living with principles, we'd lose, I think. We all have our crosses to bear. And I think if we try to pull something good out of what's going on here, and a lot of good things have come to light, kind of offsetting your all's ideas. Maybe that could change. But if we try to pull a little bit of the good and see possibly could this improvement to roads surrounding all of us create a better property value for our community and for resale value. So, you know, right now, there's a lot of people that I've heard that came in to look at a house for sale in our development and said, well, what really deterred us is what we saw as soon as we turned on to Kentucky. And at that point in time, it was the old wooden rickety fence in the trailer park. And I think our mayor remembers how I came in here and said, it's not to code. You talk about bringing things to code, bring it to code. And now we have a lovely fence. If we get a nice road, it might look good. And I don't know how you might have that road connecting to that fence. I'm hoping it'll all look uniform. But I feel something should be done to help Kentucky is a mess. And it does deter buyers. And, you know, I just hope that we can all figure, I think that the council has possibly tried to figure out how to get all of us to pitch in. And, of course, it's going to cost us the most because we use that. I use Kentucky to get in and out constantly. But I don't know. I appreciate what I've heard tonight, and I feel badly. I think probably I would fight the same issues you are. But the question I had on my little pink slip was answered.
Great.
Okay.
Great. All right, next up is Melanie Angelis.
My name's Melanie Angles. I live at 2064 Friartuck Lane in Sherwood Oaks. I'm very nervous. Never spoken before.
Relax. We don't bite.
I just wanted to say if Liberty Station's paying for the front yellow part up there, our entrance is about 10 feet from that. Like, why are we having to pay for all the rest of it? We're being assessed the most by a lot than everybody else. And I also want to say that the other lady was saying if they're going to go through to Rhode Island and make a thoroughfare there, we're going to be paying for a road that we don't want to be that busy. We don't want that going through. We don't want to have to deal with all that traffic when we had a nice golf course area and everything, and now all of a sudden we're going to have all this traffic. When they were doing Liberty Station, they weren't even supposed to go through on Kentucky. They were only supposed to go through on Graves. Now it's switched. So we know these things switch. Don't like it. I don't think we should be assessed as much as we're being assessed, and I don't think we should be assessed a lot more than the mobile homes. We don't drive more. I work at home. I barely ever leave. Most of the people, as you can see, are retired. You're assessing too much for one area and not enough for other areas. And frankly, I agree with Oakhurst. They don't have access. They shouldn't have to pay it all either. I'm done.
Hey, before the council discusses this, I want to address a couple things that I noticed. First of all, Rhode Island is not going to go through. The plan for Rhode Island is to put a bridge over to Deltona, but that's going to be where the express lane starts for I-4. So that will probably never happen. What I said originally about Oakhurst, if a tree goes down or there's a tornado that goes through there, you have to have ingress and egress on a secondary gate. When you talk about the taxes and these developers coming in, all I'm going to say is watch who you vote for in Tallahassee, because our hands are tied. We can't tell a developer that, you know, they have to put all this infrastructure in before we approve their development. It's not us, it's those people up there. So think about who you put up there is what I'm saying. Your home insurance, the same thing with the home insurance, okay? And I know this is totally off the subject, but then again, it's your state legislature for the last 2 sessions that has raised your home insurance, not the Orange City Council, the state legislature. The phases, someone mentioned putting the road in phases. That may sound like a good idea, but let me tell you what cost $1 million today will cost $2 million in a year and a half or 2 years. So there are a lot of different things, and I just wanted to make those points. Those are my feelings before I bring it to the council here for discussion. So, who's up? Anybody?
I had a couple questions, if I may.
Yep.
One of the questions, how many homes, I don't know if anybody knows, how many homes are in Oakhurst? I knew somebody would be. How much? 143? I was looking this way. I heard you, though. Okay. Thank you. 2, now, this was an issue that came on once before, and it actually came from a different subdivision about, again, we don't have to do anything. It's a private road. We can just say, forget it, leave it the way it is. We don't have to. We did not do anything to it for the last 30 years. But at one of our other council meetings, the thing was brought up about a liability issue to the city if they couldn't get down that road. And is that something I remember correctly? I think it was the fire department brought that up. Can you remind me what that was, city manager? Okay, I couldn't remember what it was.
The fire department did not bring it up. It was concerns from the residents saying you were obligated to be able to run your fire trucks and your ambulances down Kentucky Avenue. And that is, you will be liable if you're not able to do that. So that was the issue that was raised to you.
Right, but do we ever have a legal opinion on that?
No, we
Okay.
never did.
I remember.
There's, you know, the problem is that Kentucky Avenue does provide a primary means of ingress and egress to any number of residents, both at Sherwood Oaks and also freestanding lots, as well as Country Village Mobile Home Park. There are some convoluted ways to take your primary access, but it would shorten it would lengthen your response time considerably.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I have some. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, like the mayor said, we didn't have to step up and look into taking care of this particular street. It's private property, and we could just say, forget it, we're not going to do anything. But I just don't think that's the right thing to do. We have already got, we're already invested in stuff that we did in it, safety-wise, to make sure that when it rained and when you had potholes out there, that we took care of it. And that's under consideration with regard to, are we going to try to get that back? I'm of the opine that maybe we'll just let that go, but that's for more discussion if it's warranted. Now, in the interest of just being fair, this is the first time I've heard of Oakhurst not being able to have access to this road and just having that the emergency gate. Did we miss something in the study? Because I'd like to look into that.
Mr. Tiams, may I respond,
Yes,
Mayor?
ma'am.
I understand that the residents don't agree with me or with our analysis, and that's fine. But no, we did not miss something in the study. As I mentioned before, we were looking at two different areas in assessing the costs. One was the historical obligation, which according to the city records was supposed to be borne by all of the properties that were developed under the original PUD, of which Oakhurst was one. The second item was built upon the, they don't use it every day, and as I said, I hope they don't, over the ability to make a connection between two roadways and provide a back entrance onto Kentucky Avenue, should it be needed. I'm just explaining what we based
Just
it
listen.
on,
She
and I
has the floor right
understand you
now.
disagree. And that is the reason why their assessment was at 10%, I believe, of the other single-family resident. I can't see you, Chris. Is 10% correct? So they were charged a minimal rate in comparison to the other single-family residents because they only had emergency access provision as opposed to full-time access. So that had been the thinking from day one when we brought
So with
it
that
to
consideration, that's what they're paying at least, what you're saying?
Yeah.
This partition on that road, was that something that was there before, that they themselves, the homeowners, built? Was there an access to this before, or it's always been like that?
To my knowledge, it's always been like that, but I'm not familiar with who the 2005 construction plans. I did not work here then. So I really can't tell you what was in place between 2005 and 2017.
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Jones?
I'd just like to compliment everybody. I think you guys all did a great job at coming up here and expressing yourselves and how you feel, and I can definitely understand where everybody's perspective is. Like Mr. Tansen said, you know, we are in a difficult spot. You know, we're looking at the wellness of all of our constituents. And city funds, it sounds great, you know, city just take on the bill, but then that bill eventually falls to everyone within the city. When it comes to Oakhurst, most of the arguments were about no access, but then some kind of had a backlash about that no access. So, you know, when you're wanting to talk about the fire, and they had to come down through Rhode Island, you know, what we're talking about is creating a plan to where you do have that accessibility to where our fire crews can get in there, our emergency crews, and have that second access. Well, I believe that's what they're going to do, is eventually create that access.
It's
No.
emergency access. It's
Emergency
there.
access. Yes.
If I can.
Wait a minute, whoa.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
running, whoa. I run the show. I will let you speak, but come up here to the podium, please. Don't start speaking when someone else does. Yeah, and you started speaking. Now, if you want to just be quiet, we can just do that, too. Thank you.
But what I was saying is, when you talk about that emergency access, you know, of course, you're a gated community, so you don't want to access in and out for everyone to come in and out of your community. But if you need emergency access during some type of natural disaster, hurricane, fire, whatever that might be, that access would be better prepared because now Kentucky Avenue is completed. Is that correct?
That is correct. Every subdivision is required to have, over a certain size, is required to have a primary means and a secondary access. That's the code requirement.
Right.
Good?
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Marks?
First of all, I want to say I was really happy to see everybody here because we need to hear you. We need to know what's going on, right? We want to know what you think. We do care what our constituents think. The Oakhurst thing doesn't set well with me because I think someone commented that, you know, this happened years ago. Most of us weren't even on the council. We didn't do this. We're in a bad position right now. We have to make a decision that we don't want to make or may make some of you unhappy, right? So with the back entrance that we're talking about, I don't agree. I think that they should not have to pay for that entrance because they're not using it. It's locked up. It's for emergency purposes only. If you want to take that gate off and open it up so they can use it, then they should pay for it, yes. But if it's just for us to get in for emergencies, that should have been something that should have been done in the beginning when it was developed. And now it's on them. And that's a shame. It shouldn't be on us either. Honestly, it shouldn't be on us or you. So we're in the middle here, right? Just speaking freely. We take that 10% off of Oakhurst, where do you think it's going to go? It's going to go to Sherwood Oaks. And your neighbors are here. So as a community, we have to work together with us and you all, right? And figure out a solution, right? That's what we're trying to do here. We're not up here to hurt anybody. We don't want to impose more money on you. We've been sitting up here for what, 5 meetings maybe, trying to figure out a solution where it doesn't put a burden on you. And one of the things that I said was, there's a lot of retired people in Sherwood Oaks. I know that. I know people in there. I don't know too many people in Oakhurst except for tonight, what I saw, but there is people that are burdened by the prices of things right now. My mortgage just went up $400 because of taxes. Has nothing to do with Orange City, right? But it affected me, right? So I get it. So this fee that we're thinking about imposing on you all, it is going to be a burden, right? But we have to. Do you want the road fixed or do you not want the road fixed? Because here's the thing: if the road doesn't get fixed, then it's going to be your children, your grandchildren, or somebody else that's going to have to deal with this. And it's going to come back again for 5 or 6 more meetings, and here we are again. So the thing is we want to do the right thing, but we also can't pay for all of it because it would, like Cassie said, it would be on all the residents, and that's not fair. Somebody said there's other private roads in the city. Yes, there is. There's other issues that somebody else set in place, not us, right? So consider that when, we're trying to make the best decision up here, but we also have to be good stewards of everybody's money, right? And we also want to not put a burden on you. So we are considering that. I hope you all know that. I don't think that the Oakhurst thing, I'm not sitting well with that. Looking at all the notes and everything that everybody had said, I think Mayor addressed some of the things, someone mentioned the water, which has really nothing to do with tonight. But you all need to come out to meetings because we are working on the water. We have amazing people on our staff, and we've been beating at it for a couple years now, since I've been on the council. So there's a lot of things that you all don't know that we're actually doing that is great. So I invite you to come back for that. But with this, I just think that we're trying to go easy on you all. We're trying to put some money into this to help out. It's never good when someone says we're gonna put some tax on you, right? Anybody, nobody wants that. None of us want that either. But if we're gonna fix this road, it's gonna cost money. And like Mayor said,
If we wait, it's going to be even more. And who's that burden going to be on, right? Prices are going up for everything. Just to get people out to work is another thing. That's another thing. So consider all that. And then, you know, like I said, we talked about this for 5 or 6 meetings, and we went around and around about what the percentage is that we would put in, what we would help out with. I don't know if you've all followed that or not, but the Oakhurst thing, I'm not sitting well with. Thank you.
Hold on, let me see that. Lisa, do you have anything you want to add?
Not right now.
Okay. Fran?
I'm really aghast at how many people show up. I wish we had a number of people arrive for a variety of issues that we discuss. I also live in a gated community, and we do have an emergency exit. If that wasn't there, we'd be in big trouble if we couldn't get out the other one. So I'm kind of, we'll be giving this a lot of thought, because you got to have an emergency exit. It's just, you just never know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, yeah, we don't want to, deposit this on everyone in the town. It's your area. It's like where I live. If something happens, we will have to take care of it. So those are my observations. I know this is a sticky wicket, so to speak, but I think we really need to work towards some kind of agreeable resolution for ourselves here in the city and for you as residents, because we do care, believe it or not. Thank you.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes, I want to try to put some numbers to this, so we can get this done. When we first talked about this first time, I made the recommendation of $48,000, because that, to me, as an accountant, it's sunk costs. It's already money we spent to repair it over the time. So that's the $48,000 you saw on the schedule earlier, and that basically for all the repairs we've already done, and again, sunk costs. And then after some discussion with all the council members, the number grew to $60,000. It was an arbitrary number, but it was just a number that we as a council said we can add this or take this off the 1.2. I would like to amend that as a thought process for discussion, and you guys could do the math out there. I would like to take that number from 60 to 75,000. There's 2 reasons. One, for those people who do the math, 143 times $181, you'll figure that out. But I don't think extra money needs to be put on Sherwood Oaks either, or the other communities that live out there. So that's money that we as a city, as a council, would have to, instead of doing the 60, raise our contribution to 75. It doesn't get rid of your $118, but it helps. The math is the math that we as that again, it takes all of us to do this, but I'm a firm believer, no, this does not get passed on to everybody in the city. I live in a community with an HOA here in the city. We have 103 houses. We paid for those roads. When we bought our houses, we paid them. When we got done, we were a little smarter. We gave them to the city. They have to take care of them, but we paid for them to put them in. So this was before most of y'all lived there. So let's just, again, this is new. This, I think, to me, is a compromise where we try to offset the cost that is being passed on. We don't pass it on to everybody in the city. Once that road is repaired, now it's just like my community. That road now belongs to the city, and we have to maintain it just like any other public road. Like I said, does it solve everybody's issues? No, but I think it's a compromise I could live with. And like I said, I did the math. I took the 181 and the times the 143 came up to about $26,000. Added it to my 48, and that's why I came up, rounded up to 75,000. We had already talked about, we were happy with 60,000. If we could do another 15,000, I think we have a very good compromise. Again, open for discussion, and ask me any questions. My math stinks sometimes.
No, I think that's a good idea. It provides a little more relief. Like Bill said, we've already done repairs out there for $48,000. Mr. Thompson, who represents part of your area out there, he bumped it up, suggested we go to 60. And so now we're going up to 75, which I think is very fair. That's a good thing.
It's a realistic number.
Let's start down. Anything else?
I was just going to express, sorry.
Okay. No, I was
Oh,
looking at
okay.
you, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no.
Yes, I was just going to say I agree fully. I think, any kind of relief we can give, it doesn't, make a huge dent in it, but at least, it's something that we can do.
Right. It's not up to the rest of the citizens to subsidize that road out there. Ms. Marks?
I think in our original conversation, I wanted to go higher, so I would go for 100. I mean, no offense, but $100,000 to us compared to them is a big difference.
Mr. Mayor, just like the young lady said when she came up to the podium, if we work together, everybody share the expense like she was saying. There's nothing wrong with that. It'll show harmony within the community. It'll show that we care about each other. All this division, this fussing, fighting about, like he said, it's the principle behind a whole lot of stuff. But the principle can make a lot of sense if we all work together. And what Mr. O'Connor came up with sounds pretty good to me. $75,000 the city would bear. I mean, hey, I would love it if somebody come on and just take my whole house, whole mortgage, and take it and put it in their pocket. It would be great, but that's not going to happen. But if we can work together as a city, not divided, but as a city, I feel like we'll do great.
Good. Okay, so let's kind of get a little consensus here, right, Nate, so we can do that?
Sure. Yep.
Are we in favor of the
I'll give you a
75?
motion.
You want to do a motion?
I'll be glad
There
to
you
give you a
go.
motion, sir. Sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for Resolution 2423, and I know they changed it we had it down into, let me go back here real quick. I think I actually changed it a little bit now, so I have to go back. And I'm going to number 2, if adopting the resolution with a $75,000 contribution by the city. So that would take the motion to approve Resolution 274-23 as amended to reflect. Do the math for me, please, over there. Take the 1.2 minus 75,000. Thank you. As the assessment. So the city would pay 75.
Okay.
That's the motion.
So we have a motion?
Second.
Second. Now, Nasa, can you straighten me out on something here? Do we need to select the time of the payments, whether it be a 15-year?
Well,
Should
the
we do that in the
resolution.
one motion, or?
That was 3 different resolutions, I thought. That's why I heard.
Yeah, okay, so there's one resolution, and the time frame for repayment is at 20 years and 6%. The motion that we have on the floor would be 20 years and 6% at an assessment of, what's that number again? 1 million? But that's, oh, right, because I was looking 1 point, okay, sorry, yes, reduced by that. So that's
Okay,
the
so
motion
that's
on the
our
floor,
motion.
yes.
Okay, good. Okay, anyone else?
Did everybody understand that? Sorry, did I?
I think so.
explain it
Everyone
clearly?
understands
Okay.
what Nasa said? Good, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any further discussion from council? Okay, did we get a second?
Yes, we
Yes,
did.
we have a second.
Yeah, we got
Roll
a motion,
call
we got a second.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes, and the motion resolution number 274-23 passes. Okay. We are ready for adjournment? Yeah.
Mr. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, got a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? We're adjourned.